Thank you so much to our wonderful staff. My name is Sarah Elfrith. I have the great privilege of serving as chair of the Public Safety, Transportation, and Environment Subcommittee of the Senate's Budget and Taxation Committee, here for our inaugural briefing of 2024. Thank you for all the guests who are joining us, and I'm sure the many people watching from home. We're joined by my colleague from Baltimore County, Senator Salling, and we'll be joined shortly from the good senator from too many counties to always remember, Senator Jackson will be with us shortly. We have an hour this afternoon to discuss one of the subcommittee's favorite topics, which is how are we as a state best going after and utilizing federal funds. We've had unprecedented federal investment, really in almost every category of policy issue this subcommittee covers. But today we're here to talk about federal funding opportunities in renewable energy in the climate space. And so I'm thrilled that we are joined by a number of experts here. We are hearing from 5 of them today. They all have presentations. I want to thank them in advance for making the time, for being nimble, moving this from in-person to Zoom because of the weather. And with that, in the interest of everybody's time, we're going to go ahead and get started. So we have our good friend and former General Assembly member, Tom Hucker, with us. And Tom, you are first on the agenda if you are ready to roll.
All right. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Very good to be with you all. Let me see if I can. By way of introduction, I'm Tom Hucker. I spent 8 years with many of you in the Maryland General Assembly and served 8 years on the Montgomery County Council after that. And now I am a senior consultant at the Department of Energy, the Federal Department of Energy Loan Programs Office, helping states access our federal funding for their climate transition. So I'm very eager to talk to you about our offerings. Let me, at great risk here, let me see if I can share my screen. And I might need the coaching again. How do I go to a full screen? Sorry.
Slideshow.
Right, there we go. And then from beginning and not present in Teams though. What's the other?
You just do from the beginning.
Right. It's on that. You don't have full screen though, do you?
And no, we can't, but Tom, if you go to up right above that says from beginning, up to the corner left.
There we go. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair. You're doing double duty here. I'll assume you don't know much about the federal, the Loan Programs Office. We were started in 2005 to create by Congress to essentially, in the Bush administration, to essentially create a bank inside the U.S. Department of Energy. And by doing so, the original goal of Congress and the Bush administration was to provide funding for companies that had a proven technology, not startups, but a proven technology, but they didn't have enough of a track record to get a commercial bank loan. So at the time, this was Tesla when they were facing bankruptcy, GM Electric Vehicle Division, and many solar and wind companies that are now household names. And you can see the slide here shows that our original mission was to help companies move across that bridge to bankability to the point where they could commercialize, get a commercial loan, and succeed without government help. But the IRA greatly expanded our mission and our authority and gave us hundreds of billions of dollars in financing to help states manage their clean energy transition, which I want to help you access. So far, we have funded about 99 million megawatts of clean energy, created 21 million advanced technology vehicles, and over 46,000 permanent jobs with the financing that we already have. We are financing not just wind and solar projects, but you can see critical materials to manufacture and reshore things like EV batteries back in this country, geothermal projects, which you're very familiar with, and many others as well. Oh, and Senator Salling, we have a lot of financing for advanced vehicles and components to help any companies that are involved in producing electric vehicles of any types. cars and trucks, but marine and maritime and airlines as well. So far, currently, we have 202 current applications for projects around the country for $214 billion. And they fall into all these different energy categories you see there. The value proposition we bring to the table is really why would a company or a state want to borrow from the Department of Energy and not a commercial bank? Three things. One is we provide access to patient capital. So we can lend not only at below market rates because we're not a for-profit bank, we're allowed to lend at basically Treasury plus 3/8, around 5% interest rates, much lower than a company is likely to get from a commercial bank. But also, the tenor of our loans can stretch out to 20 or 30 years. And we customize our loans. They're not off-the-shelf loans you might get from a commercial bank, but customized to the needs of each borrower, whether it's a state or your private sector partners. We also offer, you can see flexible financing there. We work very closely in partnership with our applicants, and we have 10,000 engineers in the building. So unlike a commercial bank, we can really work with each applicant to de-risk a project and make sure they're using contractors that have succeeded, they're taking approaches that have succeeded, they're following best practices from other states, and they're avoiding risk that would be normally passed on to taxpayers and ratepayers. There are several major programs. I really want to focus today. I mentioned ATVM down there at the bottom right, the transportation one, but I really want to talk to you about Title 17 today, which is where we get most of our financing. We still do, like we did in the beginning, finance innovative energy and innovative supply chain work. So if you have constituents that are interested in creating jobs in that space, you should talk to me separately. But I want to talk to you about those bottom two programs, state energy financing institutions and energy infrastructure reinvestment, in the next couple minutes. All of our projects to get our financing have to be in the US. They have to be an energy-related project. They have to achieve significant greenhouse gas reductions. And they include a community benefits plan to make sure that we're creating jobs right there in Maryland and in the US, and using Maryland companies and US companies as much as possible. Innovative energy projects I've mentioned, we still do an innovative supply chain, but I want to talk to you about this EIR program, Energy Infrastructure Reinvestment. Congress wanted to help states and the private sector transition from fossil energy to more sustainable energy, and created this program. They put $250 billion in loan authority in it, and this program can help any companies transition to that. Companies that represent an energy facility now transition to a greener future. So a classic example is fossil fuel plants, whether they're coal plants or natural gas plants, helping them at their point of retirement transition to solar, battery storage, maybe green manufacturing, or I'm talking to cement plants in Maryland and other states that want to transition from coal generated to fueled by other fuel sources. There's colleges and universities that use district energy systems like you have in the Capitol complex in Annapolis, where you have a lot of old fossil fuel boilers that do the heating system. Those need to be replaced and decarbonized. We can finance that transition with this program as well. And again, when you borrow from this program, the interest rate is the Treasury rate plus 3/8, which is quite a bit lower than any of your projects are likely to get from a commercial bank. There's the examples I just ran through. So you'll have the slides so you can review this in more time. Sorry, I'm going quickly, but I wanted to make sure you had more information and could review this at your leisure. The other bucket of projects that Congress wanted to fund with the Inflation Reduction Act was the State Energy Financing Institution. They were faced with the question, how can we justify, since there's thousands of possible climate projects out there, how do we know which ones should be qualified for a low interest loan from the government? And the test they set up is, do they have support from the state? So if the state puts in a little bit of financing support, we can put in up to 80% of the project's cost. So, and this is all different types of projects, many of which you've committed to doing in your BEPS law and in the Climate Jobs Now Act. Project eligibility, as you can see, projects need one of those eligible technologies and they need to receive some support from the state. They don't have to be innovative. And so we're talking about putting solar on your schools, decarbonizing your state and county office buildings, adding solar and storage and EV charging infrastructure to schools, county buildings, state buildings, and also the decarbonization of transportation projects like converting the MTA bus fleet, converting the drayage vehicles and the shuttle buses at BWI Airport, converting to electrifying the vehicles at the port. All those types of projects could be financed through this program. Another big category is multifamily housing. Any work you're doing to reduce the carbon load and the energy costs of a lot of the low and moderate income housing in the state can be financed through this program as well, the energy efficiency and conservation enhancements to those properties. There's no minimum or maximum loan size. We can loan up to 80%, as you see there, of a project cost, and our loans are backed by the full faith and credit of the Treasury, or we can work with a commercial bank that one of your Maryland companies might already want to work with, and we can de-risk the project and guarantee most of the loan. We also require a community benefits plan. We can talk more about things you're familiar with, like a prevailing wage requirement and Buy America, Build America provisions, and local hiring provisions potentially. And there's more about our process there. I know I'm running out of time, but the application process, this funding goes back to Treasury, certainly by 2026, and maybe before that, if there's a change in the administration. So I would really encourage you to think like we do, that we have 12 months to go, and it takes 6 months to 12 months to get an application completed. So I would urge you to take advantage of this funding as quickly as possible. As I mentioned, there's $214 billion that are already applied for, and I don't believe any of those loans are in Maryland right now. They're all going to other states. They also, you mentioned tax credits here. You all have applied for and won EPA grants for decarbonization. That's terrific. There's much more funding available in both loans and in tax credits in the IRA than there are in grants. And you don't have to compete for these. You're basically entitled if you just meet the requirements. And companies can braid tax credits with loan financing. So they can take advantage of the generous tax credits. They can borrow from us at around 5% interest, and they can deliver billion-dollar projects like putting all the solar on all the schools in Anne Arundel County, Senator Elfreth, or electrifying a bus fleet in Prince George's County, Senator Jackson, and paying a very low interest rate and making money in the process. If Maryland, like other states like Michigan, New York, New Jersey, were to put out RFPs and seek answers from the private sector about how to take advantage of this funding, I'm in touch with many Maryland companies that would love the opportunity to share their ideas with you. Questions? There's some info there, and I will stop sharing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom. That was a record for a recovering politician. We appreciate that. I have a lot of questions. Are you able to stay throughout and we could tackle questions all together at the end?
I'd be honored. Yes.
Thank you. That was a lot of great information and certainly sets us up for our future budget hearings very well.
And happy to come down for individual meetings with you or your staff as well. So
that means a lot. We appreciate that. Next, we have Marissa Oshevsky here with League of Conservation Voters to give us their perspective.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me. I am Marissa Olszewski. I'm the Environmental Policy Manager at Maryland League of Conservation Voters. And I'm going to offer a broad overview of what's available in terms of federal funds. We've already heard from Mr. Hucker on loans, but I'm going to create the rest of the picture here, how these funds align with our state's climate goals. And then I'd like to offer opportunities for successful implementation of these goals through these funds. And then you'll hear from my colleagues afterwards on specific topics of funding and then from the Maryland Clean Energy Center on their role in accessing and deploying these federal funds. So what do we have here? In 21 and 2022, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and then the Inflation Reduction Act, from henceforth, you'll hear me refer to them as Bill and IRA. They each passed through Congress and were signed into law by President Biden. Together, these two laws, as Senator Elfreth already set us up at the beginning, mentioned, they account for an unprecedented amount of funding. More than $700 billion of estimated investment in our country's infrastructure, and another $369 billion in clean energy and climate investments. While much of the bill is allotted to states through formula grants, or as you heard from Mr. Hecker, available in loans, the funding from IRA is predominantly available through either direct pay incentive programs, which are available to states as well as local governments and nonprofits, or through competitive grants. Success in accessing these grants is going to require well-executed initiative, planning, and coordination from our Maryland state leaders. Money available from all of these federal funding packages represents a vast array of sectors, which together would go really far in helping Maryland meet its climate goals. They include electrifying transportation, electrifying buildings and improving energy efficiency, revitalizing manufacturing and transitioning into our clean energy economy, supporting climate-friendly agriculture, deploying clean energy, especially for our low to moderate income residents, pollution reduction programs, and support for overburdened communities. Leadership and coordination is going to be extremely important to best stack and utilize all of the available funding through both grants and direct pay, accessible to states, local governments, and community organizations to ensure that Maryland is taking full advantage of this opportunity to access funds aligned with climate policy for our state. Bringing it to more context for Maryland itself, Maryland, as we know, we've been moving forward as a leader among states in our climate goals with the passage of the 2022 Climate Solutions Now Act and the recently released Climate Pollution Reduction Plan from MDE. We recognize the need for investment to make these plans come to fruition. Investment in these plans is going to be the key to their success and the economic return on investment that will be realized through reduced healthcare costs, improved water and air quality, job creation, and increased resiliency. I want to provide something for you as members of the legislature in particular. So you have important roles to play in providing the leadership that can coordinate and accelerate access to the federal funds that are available right now. For starters, one of your roles can be providing agency guidance for going after federal funds in alignment with our state policy. Fortunately, there's already alignment, as I've mentioned, between Maryland's climate plan and many of the federal funding opportunities. Later, you'll hear from my colleagues with more details regarding those opportunities, but I'd like to briefly offer examples from 2 other states, examples of climate policy set by legislatures that align with current federal funding opportunities and are raising the stakes, but also the opportunities for implementation. So for starters, in Colorado, in 2021, their legislature passed SB 21260. It requires their Department of Transportation to determine the total pollution and greenhouse gas emissions effect that would result from transportation projects, and then take the steps necessary to ensure those emissions will not exceed the reduction levels set by the state. Federal funds were then pursued to cover the cost of ensuring that transportation emissions were limited in those cases. In Maine, in 2021, their legislature passed LD 1682. This is a law requiring their Public Utilities Commission to take climate and equity impacts into consideration when reviewing projects. This initiative is consistent with Maine's climate goals and their state's focus on environmental equity and justice, and the federal funds associated with deploying clean energy to LMI neighborhoods support that proposal. Another important role in ensuring Maryland has access to all federal dollars is to keep in mind the need for matching funds for many federal grants, especially for programs set up in IRA. As competitive grant programs, states are required to provide a percentage of matching funds. This means in order to take full advantage of the grant funding available and to have the most competitive applications, Maryland will need to ensure funds are available for these match requirements. Remembering, of course, that these investments will be just that, investments with the likelihood of significant returns. Let me offer 2 examples of states that have implemented funding sources to fund climate goals and also ensure matching funds are available to leverage federal dollars. In Minnesota this past spring, The governor there signed into law a bill with the sole purpose of, and I'm quoting this from the description of the bill, enhancing the competitiveness of Minnesota entities in obtaining federal funding. The bill appropriated money to fund a grant program specifically for clean energy and climate projects and serve as the matching funds for federal grant applications. To fund their climate efforts in New York State, they are taking a path similar to what MDE has proposed for Maryland. New York is creating an economy-wide cap and invest program, which will provide a consistent funding source for climate and clean energy programs in their state. There are a number of significant initiatives in Maryland that would benefit greatly from a coordinated and aggressive effort to access federal funds, including funding for charging infrastructure for not only EVs, but electric school buses, building electrification and energy efficient programs, especially in LMI neighborhoods. Community solar deployment, again, focused in our LMI neighborhoods, public transportation projects, and nature-based resiliency. There is an urgency to this moment. The good news is there's federal funding available to help right now, but the key word there is now, both because the funding was set with time limits and because there is uncertainty in what will continue to be available should elections cause a shift in leadership and approach in Washington. We need Maryland to take advantage of these opportunities as quickly as possible. As you are making difficult budgetary decisions, please keep in mind the financial resources available through these federal programs and work with our state agencies, the partners you will hear from today and others who are able to identify opportunities for federal funding that align with our state's goals. Your leadership in this approach will provide the chance for us to move forward with ambitious but necessary climate plan that improves air and water quality and also improves the lives of the most vulnerable in Maryland. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Marissa, and greatly appreciate real-world examples of how other states have addressed this issue. We will hopefully, if you could get those to us in writing, and that would be helpful in guiding our work moving forward.
Yes, I will do that.
Thank you. Next, we have David Smedick from the Rocky Mountain Institute.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senators. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you all today. My name is David Smedick. I'm a federal policy manager with RMI's Carbon-Free Buildings program. If you don't know RMI, we're an NGO deeply engaged in the global energy transition, working with industry leaders, policymakers, and communities to deliver and scale clean energy solutions. And I will say, as a Baltimore resident, I really do appreciate the work you all do in the subcommittee and full committee, and really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. As Marissa kind of laid out, we have a lot of sectors that are needing decarbonization efforts across Maryland. And for my part, I'm going to be focusing, as my title suggests, on building sector. And so what I want to do is, within the couple minutes that I have here, is deliver three primary points for you all. The first one is simply a reminder that the building sector actually really is a significant contributor to the climate crisis, as well as general pollution across the state. That typically takes the form of three primary sources of pollution, whether you look at embodied carbon, which is kind of the energy and the pollution associated with manufacturing building materials, steel, cement, brick, et cetera. And then two buckets of operational emissions. The pollution that's associated with the power sector that you use when you demand electricity in your home or your business. And then the pollution that is directly from direct combustion on site, typically to meet space or water heating needs when you burn fossil gas, propane, heating oil, et cetera. So those three areas kind of make up where we're seeing the pollution issues associated with buildings. I'm mostly going to focus today on the federal funding opportunities associated with those operational emissions. And the solutions there are focusing on energy efficiency and conservation, reducing the demand that we have from the power grid in our buildings, as well as electrification, and transition away from fossil fuels to meet space and water heating needs and sometimes cooking needs. So those two focuses are delivered through congressional action recently, as our two previous speakers mentioned, in the bill and the IRA. And there's a lot of different programs at hand now for folks to reduce their energy consumption and to electrify their heating needs. I'll focus just briefly on some of those opportunities. There are a whole bunch. I would say a lot of the focus of the Infrastructure Act and the IRA were on the power sector, on the transportation sector, on hydrogen, but buildings did get a good share of grant opportunities as well as tax incentive opportunities. Some of the highlights include the direct consumer rebates that you can receive up to $14,000 an individual low-income homeowner could receive to have energy efficiency improvements and electrification appliance opportunities through one of the rebate programs, and then up to $8,000 for individual units or homes for strictly energy efficiency upgrades through one of the other direct consumer rebate programs. We know that the Maryland Energy Administration, who is the key point of the recipient for those two rebate programs, they're actively considering their program design for those rebate opportunities, and hopefully we get to see money flow to consumers here toward the end of this year. And for that, we are looking at about $140 million to stand up new efficiency and electrification programs for consumers. I'd also highlight the opportunity for tax incentives for consumers to take advantage of. That's both for commercial buildings through the 179D tax deduction, and then for many homeowners and residents in the state through a variety of consumer tax incentives, up to $2,000 for a heat pump through a tax credit, $150 for energy efficiency audits, and so all sorts of fun stuff within the tax code now that folks can take advantage of, and that they can be sure are going to remain there for the next 10 years or so in the statute. I want to highlight and close a little bit. I could go on and on, but I know we want to get to questions and answers. I want to highlight on the third piece I wanted to mention was the need that all of these programs in the building sector require for coordination across state agencies, legislators, program implementers, contractors, consumers. There are so many stakeholders involved in greening our buildings that we need robust communication, coordination efforts across the delivers of the people that are delivering these programs. And I'll focus specifically on how they align with the Maryland's goals for the building sector. In the Climate Solutions Now Act, we have direction for electrification efficiency that's relayed in the MDE's most recent climate pathways and their final climate action plan. Those are ingrained in their fundamental pillars of how the state will move forward for decarbonizing the building sector. And what we need to make sure we're delivering there are whole home retrofits, especially for low-income households. That includes health and safety measures. I talked a lot about energy, but if you can't get into a home because there are roof repairs that are needed, there are asbestos remediation or mold remediation, that needs to be fundamental through the delivery of these kinds of programs. You need energy efficiency upgrades, as I mentioned, appliance electrification, and energy assistance. If a homeowner cannot actually pay their bills, making sure that they have access to direct bill assistance, or they have access to reduced clean energy costs through community solar or other grants and incentives to put solar in the community, that's a really critical piece of this. So those four pillars are really fundamental. And how you stack and braid those different programs together through DHCD, through MEA, through, we'll hear from Kathy and the MCEC team, through MDE, all sorts of programs here need to be working together. And that takes real dedicated leadership from all the different policymakers and program implementers. So the more communication you can have, the ways that as state legislators, you are making sure that the different funding streams can stack together. That includes utility incentives, talking with your friends over on the Finance Committee, making sure that the utility incentives can and do interact with the federal funds for consumers in a really clear way for the building sector. That's a really big piece as we look to the next year or two of this federal injection. So I'll pause there. Happy to chat a lot more about any of those specifics, get into the numbers with you all for the different programs that are flowing into Maryland, or any recommendations as Marissa had from other states. Happy to do that through the question and answer, but I'll pause here and turn it back to the chairwoman and yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David, and good to know that you're a local Baltimore County resident. We appreciate that insight. And again, the four pillars in particular, if you could make sure the subcommittee has that in writing, that would be really helpful in guiding the budget hearings we're having over the next 84 days.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Thank you. Next, we have Eric Norton from the Central Maryland Transportation Alliance.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thanks so much for having me here. It's really an honor to be here, and kudos to you for prioritizing this issue and kicking off your budget hearings focused on this issue. So I'm glad you're doing it. For the record, my name is Eric Norton. I'm the Director of Policy and Programs for the Central Maryland Transportation Alliance. Transportation Alliance is a nonprofit advocacy organization. Our mission is to improve and expand transportation options for the people and businesses in and around Central Maryland. We do a lot of work in that sphere, and one tool you may have seen that we use is we put out a report card every few years, the Central Maryland Transportation Report Card, and it tells us if the projects and policies that we're doing at the state and local level are taking us in the right direction in terms of transportation outcomes. The report card measures things that will improve if our transportation system is doing its job. And these are things like, how many jobs can people get to? Are the roads safe? Is our existing infrastructure being adequately maintained? Are we protecting the environment? And unfortunately, in our most recent report card we just released late last year, but perhaps not surprisingly, the results were not great. Overall, the region earned a D+. We found that too many people face transportation-related barriers affecting job access. Public transportation is too often unreliable and doesn't efficiently connect to employment centers. And in too many communities, people are just simply disconnected from opportunities. The state, along with partners in local government, can take actions to improve that grade, but of course, taking action often means making investments. And the question before this body and that the state is now grappling with is, how do we pay for it? You've heard, I'm sure, from MDOT about gaps in the state budget and proposed cuts, and there was just some news on that this morning. In anticipation of these sorts of budget issues, the General Assembly had already created the Transportation Revenue and Infrastructure Needs Commission, the TRAIN Commission, to take a holistic look at the state's current transportation situation. It recently released an interim report and proposed some small revenue increases and proposed changes, but isn't making any major recommendations until its final report due at the end of this year. So we'll be engaging on that. We hope you will be too. Before getting into the weeds, though, on the federal stuff, I wanted to take a step back and remind ourselves just some like basic high-level things about transportation spending in Maryland. The state spends about $5 billion every year on transportation. This represents about 10% of all state spending, and it's the third biggest category after health and education. Despite all the talk about falling gas tax revenue, and that's one of the things that's come up with the TRAIN Commission, according to the budget documents that you all receive every year from when you do your budget presentations with the departments, gas tax revenues are actually not declining. They're not increasing as much as the department would like probably, but they're stable. And as of the final 2022 budget, total revenues to the Transportation Trust Fund were at a record high. So that's not to say the state shouldn't be anticipating future changes and preparing to have a resilient TTF. But the fact that we have more revenue coming into the trust fund than ever before, while MDOT is simultaneously proposing massive cuts, should give us all pause and ask some tough questions of the department and our spending priorities. Despite the focus on the gas tax, it's also important to note that federal funding, bringing it back to our topic today, is the second largest source of funds to the Transportation Trust Fund. It's about 1/5. And as you've heard, there's more federal money currently available for transportation projects than at any time in history, thanks to the IIJA, or Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. Pick your alphabet soup there. Of the transportation spending, roughly 80% of this federal money comes to state governments through Federal Highway Administration, what's called formula funding. So this isn't discretionary grants that you have to go out and apply for. This is pretty much as guaranteed federal money as you're going to get, as long as Congress does its job and passes its annual appropriation bills, which I know is not as a sure thing as it used to be. But it's pretty much a sure thing. This money is pretty much guaranteed to come to Maryland. And the good news is that despite the misleading name that it comes from the Highway Administration, it doesn't just have to be spent on highways. Maryland actually has tremendous flexibility with spending both its state and federal dollars. For decades, MDOT and most other state DOTs have considered these formula funds to be highway funds. and only eligible for that use. And as recently as fall of 2022, actually, Maryland's then Secretary of Transportation was publicly telling legislators that highway funds could only be used for highways. But this isn't true, and it actually has not been true since 1991, believe it or not. Congress declared that the interstate highway system was complete and started allowing states more discretion in how they spent the federal funds. But we haven't really taken advantage of that. Maryland has used this flexibility before. For instance, it uses congestion mitigation and air quality funds. These are highway funds administered by the FHWA, but Maryland uses that to purchase buses, replacement buses for the Maryland Transit Administration. So there is precedent for this, but it's just scratching the surface of what we could do. Typically, MDOT transfers just 9% of eligible highway funds to transit. But 9% is fine, but we could transfer up to 50%. So there's room to dramatically increase the overall amount of federal money that the state spends on transit, biking, walking, ADA compliance. In 2024, Maryland will receive a record $828 million from the FHWA. And we think it's time for Maryland lawmakers and transportation officials to reprioritize how we spend these funds. It can give us all more affordable and varied ways to get around, make our air cleaner, our streets safer. The state has set ambitious goals for reducing greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector and reducing vehicle traffic. But the spending priorities of the department aren't fully aligned with those goals. For example, current funding issues that we're dealing with are impacting things like converting the MTA bus fleet to zero emission vehicles, replacing light rail vehicles that are breaking down and are past their useful life, and building new things like the rent loan. We hope the budget committees will ask MDOT how it's using the federal funds it's getting, the formula funds, how much is being flexed to transit, biking, walking. The decision to redirect spending that way is made by the governor and leaders like you. And you can help change sort of what has been our historical transportation norm and reprioritize our spending so that's in line with our goals, connects and improves neighborhoods, protects the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the land we call home. Thank you very much. I'll stick around for Q&A if you have any.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you to all our speakers for being concise because I know we do have questions. One more note, as we hear the budgets everybody is speaking to over the next 84 days, I strongly encourage folks to submit written testimony or join us for brief oral testimony on those budgets with specific feedback, changes, suggestions, etc. as we go through each budget. While we appreciate the theme we're hearing today, it's really helpful as things move faster and faster over the next couple months for you to provide that direct feedback with each budget that impacts your group. Next, we have Kathy Magruder from the Maryland Clean Energy Center.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and distinguished members of the committee. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. If you will just bear with me for a minute.
Kim, would you allow for Kathy to share her screen, please?
She's a co-host, so she should be able to.
Okay, thank you, Kim.
Hang on for a second. I apologize. I have the deck pulled up, but it is hiding from me. There we go. Okay. All right, let's go to full screen. Here we go. Okay. And I'm assuming that you all can see that. And we'll go to full screen. Thank you very much. All right. Just by way of introduction, the Maryland Clean Energy Center.
There we go. Okay, we're good.
Got it. Thank you. By way of introduction, the Maryland Clean Energy Center is a statewide green bank. We are a SEFI, as Tom mentioned in his comments. want to talk about this afternoon our role in pursuing and using federal funds to achieve the outcomes that the state wants to achieve with regard to greenhouse gas emission reductions. We are going to talk a little bit also about our activity in the grant space, and then our role in public-private partnerships to get things done. Just for those of you that don't know what MCEC is and what it does, we are a quasi-governmental instrumentality of state. Our mission is to increase clean energy jobs and drive commercialization of climate tech innovations, and also to assist and serve underserved communities and low-income households in being able to adopt these technologies to be part of the clean energy economy. This is work that is done nationally by other organizations similar to us. We act as a bridge between government, utility, academia, and industry to get things done. The center does have bonding authority and the ability to work as in loans, grants, and other tools that we can deploy to get the work done. The point that I want to make to you today is our studies are showing that it's going to take an investment of approximately $9.5 billion in transactional investments to achieve the 60% reduction goal that we've set for greenhouse gas emissions. The state currently spends through the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative Alternative Compliance proceeds and Empower surcharge dollars, $300 million a year in helping directly achieve those goals. So over a 7-year period, we estimate that would leave approximately a $7.4 billion gap in the amount of spending that it's going to take. And we also know that that's not going to come from public sector spending. It's going to require us to leverage private sector investment to achieve those goals. So we want to look at how do we reprogram existing funds, what prioritization do we use for the investments that we do have, and what actions are necessary to achieve the outcomes that are desired. It was really important for me to share this matrix with you today because this is how the Clean Energy Center approaches the pursuit of funding and the different solutions that we develop to help drive the outcomes we're looking for. Along the top axis of this matrix, you'll see the types of technologies that are measurably able to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And then on the far right, a column for cross-cutting capability where we're looking at soft skills like workforce training, on-the-job experience, community capacity building, outreach and education, planning and assessment. So those are the investments that we want to make. If you look down the side axis, you'll see the consumer audiences that we're targeting. Residential homeowners and consumers, individual and multifamily in the first box, small business and commercial, property owners, industrial and manufacturing entities, producers and distributors that would be part of the agriculture and forestry sector, municipal and institutional clients, local governments, county governments, universities and hospitals, not-for-profit organizations, and the entrepreneurs that we work with on innovation, advancement, and tech commercialization. So the challenge here is to look for where is funding that matches where these two pieces of the matrix align. What, for example, can we do to help fund the adoption of energy efficiency, weatherization, building management technologies for small business and commercial operators? How can we impact homeowners who want to buy upgraded energy efficiency, high SEER HVAC equipment? How can we help fund and finance the conversion of transportation systems to cleaner alternatives? MCEC over the past several years has proactively led and participated in grant applications totaling over $452 million. And we've received over $252 million in awards during that time, with $4.6 million of that dedicated toward administrative costs to help manage the grant deliverables. We work to match the sources of funding to the uses that we want to see to accomplish those mission-driven objectives. We consider statewide implementations of solutions, We create coalitions of public and private partners, and I'll talk a little bit about a specific example of that in a minute. And we try to minimize overhead costs for admin so that most of the money is going to achieve the outcomes desired. I'm excited to say that we just found out last week that we received a $15 million award from the Department of Transportation, Federal Highway Administration, to deploy charging and fueling infrastructure across the state. And we're very pleased to be sharing that news with you today. If you look at the chart that you're seeing in front of you on this slide, from fiscal year 2021 through fiscal 2023, we did $87.7 million in applications and received $16.2 million in awards. And you can see by the first column on the spreadsheet that these are from agencies ranging from USDA to Department of Transportation, state agencies, state organizations like the Rural Maryland Council, Department of Energy. We're looking across the board at where can we deploy solutions. The grants that are submitted in the sort of orangey pink color or coral color are grants that we did not receive a funding award, but were submitted either on behalf of partners as a pass-through grant, since we are an eligible entity to apply for some funds, or we were the lead entity on the application, or we were a partner among a coalition of applicants. The one I'd like to call your attention to is the RAISE grant, which is the first of the orange-colored grants. We partnered with BG&E, the utility, Morgan State University, and Inspiration Mobility, a company that is in the EV charging business, and submitted an application to the Federal Highway Administration to help the utility install storage capacity at their substation, which is adjacent to the Yellow Taxi Depot in Baltimore City. Inspiration Mobility was willing to donate brand new electric vehicles so Yellow Taxi could convert their fleet to electrified vehicles. The charging infrastructure would also be on BGE's substation grounds, and MSU was going to help track the impacts in terms of ridership and greenhouse gas reductions. The benefit for the consumer audience is that that would have allowed for a less expensive ridership cost, which we thought was a brilliant opportunity. We will resubmit in the round 2 for RAISE because we were told by Federal Highway that we had a very competitive application. We just needed to tweak it a little bit to be a winner in the end. As you can see in fiscal 2024, we submitted over $164.3 million in applications, and to date have been awarded $31.8 million in grant funds through various federal sources. I know this is hard to read on the screen, but you were given copies of this, so the detail is there. Suffice to say that these can range from grants like the REAP, or Rural Energy Assistance Program, Technical Assistance Grant of $155,000, to the Solar for All grant, which we submitted to the EPA Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund of $100 million. And that was through a partnership of over 54 coalition players that were engaged to help us prepare and submit the application. We are also part of a number of National Clean Investment Fund, or NCIF, grant applications as supporters, and we are looking at the potential of being a subrecipient for funds through one submitted by the Coalition for Green Capital. And we also have partnered on Clean Community Investment, or CCIA, applications. The grants that are identified in the white are those that are either in progress or will be submitted in the coming months. And then we anticipate for FY25 certain applications that we know that announcements will be forthcoming for, or where announcements have been made and submittal dates are identified. And we are working with partners to get those grants submitted. I do want to mention the 3 programs that we operate for access to capital. We are in partnership with the Montgomery County Green Bank in offering the Clean Energy Advantage financing program for residential consumers to make energy efficiency improvements on their homes. We've done $1.4 million in lending leveraged with monies from the Empower Ratepayer Surcharge as loan guarantees and rate discounts or subsidies. And the MD PACE program, where we help provide program administration for commercial lending for building improvements. And then our Clean Energy Capital program, where we use our bonding capability to finance large-scale projects for institutional customers. I think one of our most favorite to mention these days is Morgan State University, which came to us and asked us to assist them in doing a master energy and sustainability plan for their campus and implementing measures that would then help them achieve their greenhouse gas reduction goals. And they've done over 61 million in project improvements in the past 3 years as a result of our work with them. The Climate Solutions Now Act, passed and included in that bill, was a directive for the Clean Energy Center to stand up and deploy capital through the Climate Catalytic Capital, or C3 fund. $15 million was appropriated over a 3 fiscal year period for us to use to leverage more private capital by crowding it in with these funds. So for every public dollar spent, we'd like to multiply that 5 to 10 times in private capital invested either through revolving loan funds. We would use that for direct lending, loss reserve, and rate subsidies. An equity investment fund where investments would return profits to the fund, block grants or capacity building grants. All of this is designed to be focused on assisting 40% of the funds assisting low-income households and communities across the state. I do want to also share with you the metrics from our commercialization activities. We run the Maryland Energy Innovation Accelerator. Since we launched this program, where we wrap executive expertise around technologies that are coming out of Maryland labs and universities to pull those technologies to the market, often faster than waiting for the discoverer or the professor who might have discovered the technology to push it through via a company creation. We're finding great success in doing it this way, pulling that technology to the market through this program. We've accelerated over 112 companies, and as a result, 27 have been created with 61 new full-time jobs, and more importantly, raised over 119, almost 120 million in equity for those companies to continue moving their products and services to the market. And before we close, I just want to comment, I'm really delighted to see Mr. Hucker talking to you about the loan program the office, the DOE program that he represented offers. We have been looking at that for many of the sectors that he mentioned, including multifamily housing, fleet conversion, electrification of transportation, building environment improvements for hospitals, schools, institution, and the eventual successful deployment of the building energy performance standards that the state will be rolling out in 2025.
Kathy, would you mind wrapping up?
Yeah, I'm done. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. I just want to make sure we have enough time for questions because this was a very thought-provoking presentation. Thank you to all of our presenters. Again, the more you can give us direct feedback on the budget that is being introduced tomorrow via our budget hearings, the better equipped the subcommittee is to help implement our shared goals. So I really appreciate that. I'm going to kick us off with a brief question. Whichever presenter is best suited, please answer it. A lot of this feels as if, well, my impression is we're not maybe perhaps taking as great advantage of the federal funding opportunity in front of us as we should be as a state. And I always default to a very basic question when we're in a similar situation. Who should own this in the executive branch? Who should own it? And what do you believe they need from the legislative branch to be successful?
Well, in the lack of response from everybody else in the room, I do want to say that we work very closely at MCEC with other state agencies, MEA, MDE, and there are a lot of efforts going forth to pursue federal funding. I'm sure there is more out there than we can all pursue, but having that coordination between the agencies and MCEC has been very helpful. And to answer your question about who should be owning this, I think that I don't think it's any one player is the problem, because each of these grants are written to be directed at certain responsiveness. Having a coordinating entity in the state is the right idea. And here's the key: having people who have expertise in writing and managing federal grants and the funding to be able to deploy and have those people on staff has been absolutely key. This year, we hired a grant manager, and program administrators made all the difference in the world. And she's available to help local communities write their grants. So I think that's some resource investment that the state should be looking at, is expertise in writing and managing federal grants.
That's helpful. Thank you, Kathy. Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for this very enlightening conversation. I'd like to piggyback first off what the chair asked, and Mr. Gruder, you know, when you talk about having someone who could actually drill down on some of these grants. I mean, and unfortunately, sometimes maybe you found this out, maybe you haven't, but oftentimes state governments have grant writers or folks who have that capacity located within agencies versus across the entire spectrum of the government. Sometimes that's a huge issue, because as we're trying to coordinate, we're coordinating not only with each one of you all brought some unique, something very unique and needed in the state of Maryland, and you know, operating in pods is something that we tend to do oftentimes and never really connect them. So I just wanted to make that comment. I remember you all and the efforts you had, I think a year or so ago, you were part of the Aberdeen Proving Grounds, the refining of that and building out an economic development opportunity in the northern part of our state, which you know, was enlightening to us to find out the number of entities that were involved in that project. I speak from being of service to some of the southern counties, Southern Prince George's, Calvert, and Charles County, and we have this power plant thing going on down there, right? And you know, mining fields and some other challenges that we have, and as we're transitioning to cleaner energy, you know, there's always the issue of how do we make sure, one, that you know, the property is even prepared to move forward. And so I find this conversation timely. Lastly, I'll say this, Madam Chair, and I'll look forward to more information coming to us from all of you all. I'm looking at the document that was presented by Mr. Hucker, and great to see you, young man. We go back to like 2000 or something. But you talked about the advancement of the Department of Energy, where I have roots. That's where I kind of started out my career, on the other side of the world. The advanced nuclear portfolio of $12 billion. I bring that up because I represent Calvert, that has the nuclear power plant, Calvert Cliffs. Yeah. And for some reason, we haven't focused enough in the state of Maryland, where those two reactors there generate 37% of the net energy for the state of Maryland. And so I am, you know, I'm excited to see what the Department of Energy has shown here with the $12 billion that's already out there. So certainly love for the committee to be able to follow up, or you follow up with us regarding nuclear energy, because that's something I think we need to begin to focus on.
Can I just offer, Madam Chair, great to see you, Senator Sheriff, as well. Good to see so many old friends. To answer your question, Madam Chair, I'm the lead for like 12 states or so, generally the Mid-Atlantic and the South, and they go out to Missouri and Kansas. The states that are, I think, in my view, doing the best job of accessing all this federal money, and you know, we all deserve a lot of sort of leeway because this is a completely unprecedented environment we all find ourselves in. We've never seen this much federal funding and a lot of complicated programs. But states like Pennsylvania created another new, ambitious Democratic governor, created an executive director for critical infrastructure that I talk to like every week. And every week he brings in staff from the energy office, the environment office, transportation office, and we have regular conversations. I bring in subject matter experts from the Department of Energy. And the same thing is happening in Kentucky, where we paused for a while because the governor was facing re-election in November. That's behind him now. He's re-elected. And I have 6 calls on the calendar to talk about nuclear, Senator, in Kentucky, which they're very interested in, vehicles, hydrogen, solar on schools, electrifying transportation. All those are scheduled with the governor's office in Kentucky. Same thing, same level of discussion in Pennsylvania and other states that are really taking advantage of this. And I think that's something we could really use in Maryland.
That's really helpful, Tom. Thank you very much. Senator Salling, and then we're going to wrap up for today.
Chair, thank you, Madam Chair. Just real quick. I'm just looking at the loan guarantee features that you do have there, Tom. And first of all, I want to thank everybody for all the information. It was very helpful. But I've been looking into some of the grants that are out there federally, and I have been talking to a few people that have told me some of this information. But knowing more about it, I appreciate the information again. But just knowing there's no minimum and no maximum loan size, and you're telling us that the loan, total loan can amount up to 80% eligibility for projects. How can we help like some of our businesses, our local businesses, to be a part of this? And also, how can we make sure that if there's some minority groups out there, some minority LLCs, how can we support them through this?
That's a great question, Senator. I'll try to answer it quickly. You're exactly right. I agree with what Kathy said earlier. We need a lot of private sector engagement. This is a huge opportunity for the private sector, and Congress wanted the IRA to fund a clean energy transition. It was just enabled by the government, but really driven by the private sector. The same way we built the railroads in the 19th century and the highways in the 20th. So my view, the states that are doing the best job put out requests for proposals or requests for information. I could share the ones from Michigan or New York or New Jersey with you, where they say, hey, we don't have all the answers. We've been struggling with low and moderate income housing, for example, for years. Private sector, send us your best ideas. And what they're doing in New York is they'll give the best ideas $1 million in a grant as long as it unlocks our financing. Right. So they can tell the taxpayers in New York, for every dollar you put in, the loan program office is going to put in 10 to 20 more dollars. So that's a pretty good return on your investment. That creates lots of jobs in the state and solves a lot of vexing problems. So, that's happy to talk to you more.
I appreciate that. Thank you for your information. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for everybody and the committee members. I can't think of a better way to set ourselves up for success over the budget process that we're about to engage in. Again, appreciate direct examples of what other states are doing better than we are, solutions, and those direct pieces of feedback in the budget. We really appreciate that moving forward. So this will not be the last time. We hope to hear from you over the next 84 days. You are partners in this work. We greatly appreciate it. And with that, we are adjourned for the day, and I'll see the subcommittee tomorrow.
Thanks so much.